Approved parties were omitted. The Forward Guyana Movement and the Assembly of Liberty and Prosperity have been excluded from the ballots in Regions 7, 8, and 9. And while ALP is excluded from Regions 1 and 2, despite both parties meeting all legal requirements to contest. 2, constitutional rights are violated. Electors in these regions are denied the opportunity to vote for duly approved national lists, contrary to constitutional rights are violated, rather, that the electors in these regions are denied the opportunity to vote for duly approved national lists. This is contrary to Article 59, the right to vote, and Article 160, proportional representation. We're alleging discrimination, that the affected regions are predominantly inhabited by Guyana's indigenous Amerindian population. Excluding parties in these regions disproportionately burdens Amerindian voters, amounting to discrimination on the grounds of race and place of origin. 4, the impact on proportional representation. By artificially reducing the total national votes available to excluded parties, GECOM's practice distorts proportional allocation of seats in the National Assembly. Crystal Hadassah Fisher, a registered elector in Region 9 and a candidate on the national list, the plaintiff, is arguing that GECOM's ballot design is unconstitutional, discriminatory, and silences the voice of rural indigenous communities. The motion, filed by Dr. Vivian Williams of VMW Law, seeks urgent relief by asking the court to declare that any elections held without full party inclusion are null and void, that an order restraining GECOM from excluding any duly qualified party from national ballots, direct GECOM to immediately include the Forward Guyana Movement list of candidates in Regions 7, 8, and 9, and ensure that voters in Region 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9 are not restricted in their electoral participation. The Forward Guyana Movement is steadfast in its commitment to holding GECOM accountable, ensuring that elections are conducted fairly and inclusively for every Guyanese citizen. This court challenge, rather, is not just about a technicality. It is about giving the people of Guyana the knowledge and fair choices they need to make the right choices come September 1, and indeed in any election we are going to have in this country. When voters are denied the full truth of their options, democracy itself is weakened. And so the Forward Guyana Movement stands possibly as David against the Goliath of the ruling PPP and a complicit GECOM, insisting that every Guyanese, from the hinterland to the coast, deserves a fair chance to choose their future. This fight is about fairness, it is about dignity, and it is about ensuring that no community is silenced or treated as a second class in their own country. Forward Guyana Movement believes this moment to be of utmost importance because real change can't wait. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's our prepared statement.
I will now open the floor to questions. Please identify yourselves and the media houses that you're representing. And ladies and gentlemen of the media, I really implore you to just, if we can just stick to the GECOM issues during today's question and answer segment. Well, unless the presidential candidate advises otherwise. Svetlana, I think you have the first question.
Hi, good day, Svetlana Marshall, News Source. I'm just trying to seek clarity on the issue. Is it that the party, I know the party is contesting, for example, for Guyana in 7 of the regions. Is it that GECOM, in the general component of the election, was expected to include all 6 parties contesting the election? Is that the contention?
The contention is that GECOM's instructions and its guidance indicates that all of the parties that met the minimum requirements to participate in 6 districts would qualify for the national and general elections. They have issued a press release that says that. They have issued a graphic that also sets that out very clearly. It therefore means that the ballots as are currently printed, and the guidance and the information issued by GECOM are at variance, because they were at pains to point out that while all the parties, and we are happy to provide you with that press release, that while all the parties have met the requirements to participate in the general elections, only I think 4 of them are participating at the regional level. And so there is some inconsistency with GECOM's posture and its guidance material, and indeed the Constitution as we are contending, and the ballots as are printed. Because what has happened is that there is a candidate in Region 9, duly qualified to be a candidate, a voter on the list, that cannot vote for herself or her party.
While Svetlana is thinking, questions from anyone else in the room?
Good afternoon, Antonio Day from Nightly News. Ms. Desir, so point of clarity, the regions that are excluded are regions 7, 8, and 9, correct?
The regions that are excluded for the Forward Guyana Movement are regions 7, 8, and 9. However, the principle holds for any region. For example, with the ALP, and I will hasten to add that the ALP is not party to these proceedings, but the fact remains that those residents in the areas that they too are not contesting, even though they meet the minimum requirements, they do not appear on the ballot. And that amounts, in our view, to the number of constitutional violations that we've cited.
Another question for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that you've seen the ballots, and upon realizing that the party has been excluded from these 3 regions, could you say if you, 1, consulted with the commission on the issue, and 2, what was the response given to you?
Indeed, our elections agent, Mr. Nicholas Chesney, he was on hand for the receipt and the verification of the ballots. He confirmed that we did not appear on the ballots as we have set out. And he also confirmed with GECOM staff that the information that was issued earlier was erroneous, and that in fact we would not be appearing on the ballot. Nicholas, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
No, that's correct. And what I would add is that by the time we found out that we will not be on the ballot, this was after nominations day as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, there's nothing that can be done.
Right, right. Because this was a continuous issue that we were raising with GECOM. We are aware that there was some discussion with GECOM internally that this graphic that was issued by GECOM could lead to some misunderstanding, and that there was a request. And of course we cannot substantiate this. There was a request that this missive be withdrawn, but it was not. And so here we are with what we believe to be a very serious issue that cuts to the heart of what an inclusionary democracy should be. We are deeply concerned that what we've been noticing with GECOM is as if these elections have taken them by surprise. It is very disconcerting to see GECOM's attitude in this regard. Now, I will give you another example of the shifting goalposts. We were told and we were given guidance through GECOM's official manual that for every region you had to have a minimum number of candidates and a maximum number. What we did, we struck the midway point. When we submitted our lists, we were written to by GECOM to say that you are required to have the maximum candidates. Now, can you imagine how difficult that is logistically for a new party without the logistic capacity of the older giants in this regard, but we were able to do it. And so what is the use of providing a minimum standard if you are going to then retract that and tell people you have to abide by the maximum? What is the use of saying to the electorate that in order to qualify to participate in the general elections, you must meet the threshold of being able to compete in 6 districts, and then you exclude them from the general elections? And so this cuts to the question of how our ballots are presented. It begs the question as to whether there needs to be a national ballot, a geographic constituency ballot, and a regional ballot. So all of these matters are matters that we want clarified, because Forward Guyana Movement does not intend to proceed just being dragged along. We want clarity, we want the courts to pronounce, and we want GECOM to get its act together.
Does this affect your chances of, I know you spoke about the candidate in Region 9 who would not be able to vote for her own party. But what is the overall implications with regards to the vote and the tabulation? Would it affect your ability to acquire a seat in the National Assembly? Should you amass, would it affect, obviously it would affect the number of votes you secure? Absolutely,
it will affect the number of votes we secure, because you're excluded from 3 regions. And so practically, if a party, if a resident, if a Guyanese citizen of Region 7, 8, or 9 sits and looks across the political landscape, he or she is assessing options, and they're saying, you know what, as a citizen of Guyana, I like Forward Guyana Movement policy in this regard. I feel like I should vote for them. Or they look at what ALP has to offer, for example, and say, you know what, I like this. I believe that this is something that I could get behind, and I'm interested in voting for them. What GECOM has done is effectively denied them that opportunity.
Wasn't that your reasonable expectation based on the requirements set out by GECOM or the statements issued by GECOM, that the only component of the election that you would be excluded from with regards to the regions would be the regional elections, so you would not be seen on the ballots for, is it Region 9, 7?
6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8. Was that the reason?
That is the logical deduction and expectation for anybody that can read law or a manual. It is the obvious interpretation. Clearly, GECOM has a different interpretation, and it has been allowed to go on with this interpretation for years gone by. Well, like I said, Forward Guyana is not prepared to just go quietly along with whatever they say. They must say to us why this is legal, because on the face of it, it appears to be unlawful. And they must say to the Guyanese living in Regions 6, 7, 8, and 9, why is it that you may love Forward Guyana, but you are not able to vote for them, even though they meet the minimum requirements? I guess what you're hearing me say is that we're not prepared to hear it has always been so.
And I must make the point that we're not just representing Forward Guyana Movement's interests here. Manzo would have earlier referenced ALP. This is about the systemic disenfranchisement of citizens in the exercise of their constitutional rights, their constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedoms. So it definitely needs to be addressed, and we'd like to hear more from GECOM on the matter.
You had a question? Yes.
Mrs. Slow, just for clarification, because maybe I missed it, but have Forward Guyana Movement reached out to GECOM directly, and have they addressed it in any way to you?
This is what we were saying earlier. Our elections agent did speak with, I think it was the DCO.
Yes, Mr.
The DCO.
DCO?
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yes, yes.
Could you say who's representing the party? I don't know if I missed it. If it's today the application was filed, is there an attempt to have it addressed before is there going to be an injunction? We know that
well, there's a fixed date application. It has been filed. Of course, you know now We are filing through a portal, so it's an e-filing. And so those documents have been lodged, and Mr. Vivian Williams, who I think is a very able and competent attorney, is Ms. Fisher's attorney in this matter.
Can you confirm the other persons from Region 8, 7, and 6 whom you mentioned, do they have separate legal representation, or the legal representation encompasses everyone?
The legal representation encompasses everyone, and not only the candidates or those, as Mr. Bailey pointed out, who are members or supporters of the Forward Guyana Movement, but is a question for the wider population, the wider citizenry, as to how our elections are run and why Guyanese are not afforded the full menu of parties, even though they meet the minimum requirements.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? If none, and I don't think anything else from the panel, Mike, you good? You good?
I think the final point is that it may seem as if Forward Guyana Movement is making a lot of noise about nothing, but this is a very important issue. As Ms. Walton would have covered, this speaks directly to the heart of the Constitution, which is the guiding document for the nation. It speaks to issues of disenfranchisement, which the Constitution speaks against. And we're here to craft a new system to rile against the status quo. And these things must be addressed in that vein. So we would hope they're taken seriously. And if it was just one issue that we've been having with GECOM, maybe it could be dismissed. However, this has formed a part of a pattern of behavior from GECOM with regard to very concerning things that have been happening within that body. So I think you mentioned complicity earlier. That's a big concern. So it's very important for us to raise all of our concerns right now in the beginning as we move into this process. So there's clarity, transparency, accountability, which is everything that we're here for.
Just for clarity, sorry.
That's all right.
Would you want to see the court, is there a push to have the court hear this case before the members of the discipline services or forces go to the polls on Friday?
We would want the court to hear the case at the earliest possible time. As you know, crafting a case of this magnitude requires time and great skill. And I'm very proud that the Forward Guyana Movement, as a new movement, has taken this initiative. We do have older parties around with far more established legal capacity. And yet we're the ones doing this. And so we will push for this case to be heard as soon as possible. I know there are about 10,000, less than 10,481 joint service ranks that are voting on Friday. And indeed, we're talking here about a question that will affect over 730,000 more Guyanese electors as per our voters list. I want to say this as well. We are deeply concerned about the size of the voters list. Deeply concerned. And I am disappointed that we appear to be going along with what is obviously a bloated list, with what we understand to be jeopardies that will result in electoral malpractices, or that could facilitate electoral malpractices. And yet we seem to be gingerly going along. And that is problematic. What do we do after?
Might I also add that when we say it's obviously bloated, on a percentage basis, according to the numbers that have been put forward by GECOM, 86% of our population is of voting age. That's 86% of the men, women, children, and babies are of voting age, supposedly. Now, there are dead people on the list that GECOM has not removed. There are emigrants from Guyana, but statistically, if we compare this to global averages, a global average is closer to 70%. That's for a very developed country with an aging population. 70 to 75% would be quite high. So for Guyana to have a voting population of 86% is practically impossible. When we compare that as well to other statistics that have been provided by the administration, such as the registration information for the cash grants, which put our young adult population at around 30%. 30 plus 86, you've already gone over 100 there. It's impossible. It's impossible that this figure exists, and there's no explanation, no reasonable explanation for it. I've seen a lot of miscommunication out there with regard to how a name gets removed from the list, and consequent to that, I don't think many people have taken this issue as seriously as it should be taken. Many people are still of the somewhat misguided belief that the only way a name can be removed from the voter roll is for the relatives of the deceased persons to approach GECOM with the death certificate and the like. There's also a provision for GECOM to remove those lists after they've received a list from the registration office, GRO, that shows the list of deceased persons. So there's no reasonable excuse that persons should be on that list for 15, 20 years and not have been removed yet. So if the very PPP, the incumbent, have campaigned in the previous election season for a clean list, they campaigned for biometrics, it's interesting that they have reversed course on these requests or the desires that they have, and we are here today. But we will continue to push for what is right and what is just. There are provisions in the law for these names to be removed without people having to go in there. And there are also issues such as the one that Forward Guyana raised with Mr. Semple, who went to GECOM and found that not only had his ID been changed on the system without any request being there that he made to have his details changed, his address was changed to a fictitious address in Sophia, and his polling station was changed. This is between March and June, the March and June publication of the list this year. To date, his information remains incorrect on GECOM's website, though they promised to have it addressed. Nonetheless, that was practically impossible, because going back to fix one person's information means they would have to now open a big can of worms. So these are part of a pattern of concerning behavior, of issues that we've seen being raised with regard to GECOM. So I think it's prudent to raise the alarm at every stage so that Guyanese are observant, and whatever can be done will be done. So if this is something that we can challenge and we can have it heard in court, so let it be. We would like to see the restoration of respect for not only the Constitution but the processes that are meant to guide this nation.
Now, I would want to add, because our team was involved in an extensive exercise with GECOM over the weekend, and the question was asked, when was the last transmission of the list from the General Registrar's office with persons who would have died and needed to be removed from the list? We were told that it was February of 2025. Yet we have people calling and indicating that there are relatives there who have died 10, 3, 2 years ago, and they are still on the list. It is a problem. And I cannot understand how is it that we are dragging the people of Guyana to an election with an obviously bloated voter list, with no intervention, with commissioners who appear to be either unwilling or unable to halt this madness. If I were the leader of the opposition, the commissioners would have had to resign. I would have asked them to resign in protest, because what else is the recourse? The court said that you cannot remove migrants without legislative intervention. In the opposition, we were ready, willing, and able to support that legislation so that we could have a clean voters list. That was denied. every decision that is made at the GECOM is made by a majority decision, by the chairperson voting with the PPPC administration. What is the point of having 3 opposition commissioners? They would have had to resign in protest. And maybe that is the solution, to force everyone to realize and understand that this is a serious matter. And that for us to go to an election with all of these inconsistencies and then be told, oh, if you're not happy, take it to an elections petition, is playing in the faces of the people of Guyana, and it's disrespectful. And Guyanese must be outraged. Guyanese must absolutely be outraged.
All right.
Just for clarity, I didn't see, I haven't seen yet the application submitted to the court. And I think I asked briefly about this just now. Has the party asked for an injunction to halt the holding of the elections pending the conclusion of this case to ascertain who's right and wrong? And would you be so bold as to call for GECOM to halt the elections until this issue is resolved?
I will be happy to share with you the orders that have been sought, and I will read them out. The applicant is praying for the following orders. 1, a declaration that the practice of the Guyana Elections Commission in excluding political parties contesting the national elections from appearing on the ballot in certain geographic regions violates the applicant's rights as well as the rights of voters in these regions to vote and to equal suffrage under Article 59 of the Constitution. A declaration that GECOM's exclusion of political parties from ballots in certain regions is discriminatory in and of itself, and or in its effect, constituting differential treatment of voters based on the place of origin and race, contrary to Article 149 of the Constitution. A declaration that GECOM's system of omitting political parties from ballots in regions where they are not fielding candidates for regional seats in the National Assembly distorts proportional representation, undermines the principle of representative democracy, and is unconstitutional. A declaration that GECOM's exclusion of the Forward Guyana Movement list of candidates from the ballots for national elections in regions 7, 8, and 9 constitutes a denial of the first named applicant's constitutional right as a candidate to ballot access and to contest in free and fair elections. A declaration that GECOM's exclusion of political parties contesting the national elections from ballots in certain geographic regions violates Article 13 of the Constitution by undermining inclusionary democracy, restricting voter choice, and limiting the ability of smaller parties to participate effectively in the political process. A declaration that any elections held without the inclusion on the ballots in all 10 regions of all political parties that have satisfied the legal requirements to contest the national elections are null, void, and of no legal effect. An order maintaining that GECOM includes, mandating rather, that GECOM includes all political parties contesting the national elections on the ballot papers in all geographic regions. An order restraining the Guyana Elections Commission, whether by itself, its officers, servants, or agents, from proceeding with the conduct of the forthcoming general and regional elections unless and until the Forward Guyana Movement list of candidates is duly included in the ballots in all 10 electoral regions in accordance with the Constitution and the Representation of the People's Act. Costs and such further other relief as the Honorable Court will deem just. And let me add and conclude by saying that we are aware of the frustration that the people of Guyana have with our judicial system. But we want to say to them that if we are going to grow and build this democracy, we are not going to be afraid of marching up the court steps and requiring that these laws be clarified. It is the responsible thing to do as a citizen, and it is the court's duty to demonstrate their impartiality here. I will say that I am concerned that there seems to be an attitude of awarding costs in very, very large sums in some of these matters. And I noticed that the Attorney General has been in the media gloating that the costs should be more because these actions are, as he deems them, frivolous, vexatious, and specious. But we want to remind the Attorney General that the CCJ in the Chris Jones case has said that people who bring these types of litigation are actually doing a public service because these are matters that require clarification. And so as often as we need to march up the court steps, we will do it. And in the Chris Jones case, the court vacated the order as to costs because they were saying punitive costs have no place in constitutional matters because they prevent or they disincentivize citizens from interrogating their constitutional rights.
I just for some clarification, because coming back to, you mentioned that you brought the attention to the CEO. Okay, the CEO, sorry. Could you say directly what was his response? If you got a response from GECOM, what was his response directly? Just sort of for clarification.
They confirmed.
Please repeat the question for online audience.
Oh, we're sorry. He's asking about the response of the DCO to our queries. He did indicate that contrary to what this graphic, because members of the press will recall that there was a graphic put out by GECOM, and we'll be happy to provide you with it, because we've included the press release as well in the pleadings, that for the national ballot, all parties qualified. In fact, there was a yellow highlighted line with a tick indicating that all parties qualified. And then there was the geographic constituency, which showed, in the case of Forward Guyana, the 7 geographic constituencies, which I will remind persons amount to 25 seats in the National Assembly. And then the last line would have been the regional ballots. So that in and of itself, GECOM's press release in and of itself, is misleading and has resulted in the problems that we have here. And we're not prepared to just have GECOM say, oh, no, that was a mistake. No. No, that mistake is affecting the ability of residents of several regions, amounting to tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 persons, being unable to have access to the full menu of political choices.
All right, before you go, and good afternoon to our members in online land. I don't want to miss this question, but I think it's a Colwyn Abrams from Channel 9 is asking for the panel's thoughts on GECOM's decision on the no use of cell phones, of course, on polling day in the polling stations.
Well, you know, the flip-flopping is the problem. Because I think it was raised by the Carter Center and then it was reversed to say no cell phones. There are clear concerns about voter and vote buying. And we are on the ground and you hear the complaints all the time. We were told that if we vote a certain way, we take a certain photograph as evidence and we present it, people are being offered as much as $50,000 to vote in a particular way. And this is what we talk about when the PPP makes use of the resources of the state to fund their campaign elections, a point that I note has been flagged in the last Carter Center report.
What I would add to that is while GECOM is saying they will disallow phones in the polling station, not having phones in the voting booth is another thing entirely to not having any phones at all in the polling station. Because typically when there are issues of accountability, transparency, phones are used to gather evidence by different parties to verify the integrity of the process. So on one hand, this is where it's sort of giving with one hand and taking with the other hand. On one hand, they've conceded, and this, by virtue of the fact no phones in the polling station, there's no phones in the booth. However, now you're left in a case where it seems like no phones are allowed in. So one thing I did notice is there has been an increase from 2020 to 2025. There's an increase of about 438 new polling stations that have been added. So I've seen some amount of concern over the private residences that will be used by GECOM. There's about 62 private residences, but on checking back to 2020, you can actually see there's been about a 50% reduction in the number of private residences being used. In 2020, it was about 131 private residences. But there's been a significant increase in the number of polling stations. So there need to be more scrutineers, and cell phones have typically helped a lot with gathering data and keeping everyone honest. So I think we would need some more clarifications where that was concerned as to whether or not GECOM was willing to have persons with phones for those matters and not in the polling booth directly in the voting booth.
Thank you, Francis. Somebody else had a question. Yes, go ahead.
My last question, Mr. Desir, should the Guyana Elections Commission renege on what was put forward to them, do you intend to engage the current international community? Because as you know, the European Observer Commission is in Guyana conducting surveys and they're engaging political parties. So do you plan to take it to or bring it to their attention should GECOM not acknowledge?
Yeah, we are continuously engaging the observer missions, and indeed some of the representation that we've made about the use of state resources, about the lack of access to state media, have been reflected in their pre-elections report. So it is something that we will continue to update them on. And in fact, earlier in the day, we had a question from a media house concerning the same pre-election report and the fact that they cited the Forward Guyana Movement for not signing the Ethnic Relations Commission, the Code of Conduct. So I will let you know that this morning, or just after lunch today, I wrote to the Carter Center in the following terms, and I'll quickly read this out for you. Dear members of the Carter Center, we write in reference to your August 19, 2025 pre-election statement, and in particular to the reference made to the Forward Guyana Movement concerning the non-signature of the ERC's 2025 Code of Conduct. Forward Guyana welcomes the Carter Center's continued commitment to electoral transparency and democratic integrity in Guyana. We share that commitment fully and have consistently demonstrated our dedication to peaceful, respectful, and law-abiding public engagement. However, we must respectfully but firmly clarify our position regarding the ERC's Code of Conduct. Our decision not to sign was not taken lightly, nor should it be misinterpreted as a rejection of the values that the Code seeks to promote. Rather, it is a principled stance rooted in a deep concern for the credibility, enforceability, and equity of the instrument as it is currently drafted. In good faith, Forward Guyana submitted a detailed letter, which we attached, to the ERC outlining substantive concerns and constructive recommendations. These included the Code's lack of binding legal effect, defined sanctions or procedural safeguards, the absence of any mechanism for receiving, investigating, or adjudicating complaints, vague and undefined terminology open to selective interpretation, the omission of key actors such as GECOM officials, security forces, and state media from its scope, the absence of equity provisions to protect new and smaller parties from discrimination or marginalization. And finally, the over-reliance on goodwill in a political environment that has too often failed to reward that goodwill. It is important to note that the ERC has had several years across multiple electoral cycles to refine its code to meet basic requirements of credibility and functionality. That 2025 version remains that the 2025 version rather remains symbolic rather than substantive is deeply regrettable. Forward Guyana is committed to reforming Guyana's political culture, not perpetuating its veneers. We cannot in good conscience lend our endorsement to mechanisms that appear well-meaning but fall short of genuine accountability. To do so would be to mislead the public and undermine our own principles. We trust that your final report will reflect the full context of our decision and acknowledge our efforts to elevate, not evade, the standards of political conduct in Guyana. We remain open to continued engagement with your mission and to all stakeholders who are sincerely invested in building a stronger, fairer democracy. And so they are in receipt of that correspondence, and we will keep you apprised as to whether there are any further developments in that regard.
All right, thank you very much, Presidential Candidate and Founder of Forward Guyana Movement, Mr. Manzo Walton-Desir. Thank you to Francis Michael Bailey. Some of you know him as Michael Francis Bailey, National Candidate and Executive Member of VPAC, and also Mr. Nicholas Chesney, Forward Guyana Movement representative at GECOM. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you very much. We will keep you apprised of what is happening through, of course, FGM. We'll keep you apprised through myself or Mr. Randolph Bridgelow. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.